Nintendo IPs, them's is the things I like to analyze. My mom was right, I'll never be a real lyricist. We have officially entered Nintendo's Switch 2 era. An era filled with possibilities both exciting and frightening. The thing I think will be most fascinating to glean from this new era is how Nintendo's output of new IPs will look. Considering the previous Switch era was the first era in Nintendo's 40-plus year history of making video games to break their practice of having at least one new IP release each year. I've talked about this before in a previous video, but I have a suspicion that Nintendo will continue their trend of reviving dormant series at a more frequent pace, while introducing less brand new IPs into this current era. Which is, of course, an exciting prospect in and of itself, because Nintendo have hundreds of dormant IP ripe for the reviving, many with dedicated fan bases drooling at the prospect. In case you're new here, I'll remind you that I don't consider a Nintendo IP dormant unless it has gone 10 or more years with no new releases. So despite how often I've clamored for ARMS 2, I wouldn't actually consider that a revival, unless we have to wait till 2027 or later to get it. And that's such a distant, far-off future year. 2027. That's a whopping 2 years away. I need to finish that screenplay. Alright, I think you're catching my drift here, right? You read the title, you saw the thumbnail, you know what we're talking about today. Which of the new IP Nintendo introduced on the Switch do I think will make it to the Switch 2? Let's discuss. How many new IP did Nintendo introduce on Switch 1? 13. A pretty decent number for just one system. Nowhere near the NES or DS's output, unsurprisingly, but pretty much in line with the likes of the SNES 64 and Wii U. But like those systems, and well, most systems sadly, I don't expect most of these series to be iterated on for the next generation. Let's go down the line in chronological order and assess the respective likelihoods of getting a Switch 2 sequel, shall we?
1, 2, 3.
One of only 2 Switch original IPs so far to have gotten more than one game, 1-2-Switch is a franchise I don't think will get an entry on Switch 2. And it's not because everybody 1-2-Switch was so poorly received or anything. I think it has more to do with the fact that this series seems to be one Nintendo sees as being useful as a vehicle for packaging social party games where multiple people in a room are encouraged to get up and interact with one another more so than with a digital interface. But with things like Game Chat and the Switch 2 camera being incorporated more centrally across their mainstream releases like Mario Kart and Mario Party, I don't think Nintendo would bother making a bare-bones social experience for any of these new features that would suit a new 1-2-Switch title. If anything, Nintendo would be wiser to use any ideas of that nature to promote the WarioWare series, or even their front-facing IPs that don't get a lot of spin-offs like Animal Crossing. So yeah, while 1-2-Switch is lucky to not be a one-and-done, I don't think it'll be so lucky as to escape dormancy on Switch 2. Snipperclips can really go either way, depending on what James Montana's team are prioritizing and how closely they'll be working with Nintendo this generation. Considering Nintendo have since approached them with the opportunity to remake Advance Wars, there's a good chance they'll continue having a lovely relationship this gen. But will they want a new Snipperclips game? I'm leaning on the side of probably not. It was a nifty little experience that complemented the Switch's tabletop co-op well, but at this point, I think players generally understand how to play games together. And Nintendo themselves have stated that they want Game Chat to be a novel and intuitive game-sharing feature for the Switch 2, equivocal to how players could hand friends a Joy-Con in person with Switch 1. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and predict that we will not see a new Snipperclips game on Switch 2. Now, ARMS, on the other hand, pun not intended, is among the more likely candidates from this bunch to get a Switch 2 sequel, in my mind. And I'm not just saying that because I'm one of the biggest ARM fans you'll ever meet who's desperate for more content from that world, no. By my estimation, ARMS is already in the same boat as semi-infrequent but still fairly prominent Nintendo series like Pikmin and Donkey Kong. Because just as Pikmin is the second most prominent series for the 2D Mario team, and Donkey Kong is now the next most prominent series for the 3D Mario team, ARMS is the second most prominent series under the charge of the Mario Kart team. And since Switch 2 is launching with a Mario Kart, which, gosh willingly, won't try to nickel and dime us with years of DLC considering how steeply it's priced, Nintendo EPD9 should, in theory, be free to take another swing, again, no pun intended, at ARMS. Also, Consider the fact that ARMS is getting a free Switch 2 Edition upgrade that'll allow the game to be played at a higher frame rate and resolution. The fact ARMS' Switch 2 Edition is getting these enhancements but not game share integration like some other Switch 1 titles suggests to me that EPD9 may be working on a sequel built off the OG's framework that will likely include features like game share and game chat, which EPD9 wouldn't need to return to a game like ARMS 1 to experiment with, because they've already been working with it for Mario Kart World. This may be a bit of a stretch, again, no pun intended, but even if this weren't the case, I'd feel relatively sure that this new IP that was up for a graphic novel tie-in made it into Smash Ultimate's DLC, and continues to this day to be promoted alongside some of the Switch's most recent and financially successful titles, will get a Switch 2 sequel someday. Could be next year, could be 6 more years from today, but someday it'll happen. Please happen. Yeah, no, Labo is a neat idea and all, and so far it holds the record among Switch original IPs in terms of number of game releases, but I don't think it did as well as Nintendo would have liked, nor do I believe it would do as well on Switch 2. Oh well. Now, Sushi Striker is an interesting case. Technically, it's a 3DS original, but it released day and date on Switch as well, so I'm gonna count it. The team that made this game, Indie Zero, typically just assist other teams, primarily Nintendo EPD4, with smaller releases like NES Remix and Big Brain Academy. But if they were to set out to do a game all on their own again, would it be another Sushi Striker game? My gut says probably not, but the Sushi Striker franchise does have a lot more going for it than most Switch original Nintendo IPs. There's a fun cast of characters, a well-realized setting, a unique and pretty satisfying gameplay loop, and a bunch of cool collectible Pokemon-like monsters that evolve and everything. I don't know, man, it would seem like a waste not to try a new game at some point, but heaven knows it wouldn't be the first Nintendo IP with that much potential left to wallow in dormant one-off limbo. My verdict for this video's sake is no. I don't think the Switch will get a new Sushi Striker game, but I'd love to be wrong. Now, Astral Chain is definitely among the higher quality Switch original IPs, but will it get a Switch 2 sequel? I'm gonna go with yes, actually. While Platinum Games have been weird about working with publishers lately, Nintendo have been one of their more reliable partners. In fact, shortly after the game launched, Nintendo bought the rights to Astral Chain from Platinum, which either bodes well for the possibility of a sequel down the line, or just goes to show Nintendo learned their lesson after not doing the same for Wonderful 101, and watching that gem get an inferior crowd-funded self-published multi-plat port. But yeah, for the sake of today's video, Astral Chain, I'm gonna go with yes. It'll get a Switch 2 sequel. Little Town Hero is an easy no from me. Non-Pokemon Game Freak games tend not to get sequels, so even if this game is a total darling up there with Pulseman and Harmonite, I'm pretty darn sure it won't get a sequel anytime soon. Now, if there's any Switch original IP that is all but guaranteed to get a Switch 2 sequel, it is undeniably Ring Fit Adventure. That game sold ludicrously well, having stayed in the top 10 highest-selling first-party Switch games list for many years after it launched. And when you consider the fact that the game's peripherals are only compatible with the old Joy-Con, and the fact that Switch 2's camera, game chat, and other social features could introduce a whole bunch of compelling new content to a Ring Fit game, it's not a question of if there'll be a new Ring Fit Adventure game on Switch 2, but when. Yeah, no. Sorta like Snipperclips, The Stretchers is an indie game Nintendo published and I believe hold the copyright for, but I don't think it's destined for a sequel. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Nintendo developers made Jump Rope Challenge in 2020 during lockdown, and released it on the eShop for free as a way to lift people's spirits and encourage them to stay active during that turbulent time. And while that's sweet and all, I don't think it was the beginning of a franchise destined to be continuously iterated on. So no, I don't think Switch 2 will see the release of Jump Rope Challenge 2, as funny as that would be. Good Job, like The Stretchers, is an indie game Nintendo published and owned the copyright for. And just like The Stretchers, I do not believe this game will get a Switch 2 sequel. Simple as. Buddy Mission Bond. I know very little about this game, as it is a story-heavy adventure that's only available in Japan. But I'm going to take the fact that even after 4 years, Nintendo still hasn't felt the need to give this game a wide release as a sign that it will probably not see a sequel on Switch 2. It could, but I'm just going to consider the possibility to be very unlikely. Okay, just one more Switch original IP to consider now, and this is an interesting one. Like ARMS, Game Builder Garage is also getting a Switch 2 edition, the most prominent new feature being compatibility with the new Joy-Con's mouse control. But I don't think this is an indicator that Nintendo won't bother with a sequel, as A, the Switch 1 edition was already mouse compatible, just with USB mice. B, there's exponential room for growth in that first game that a sequel could blow out of the water. And C, the sharing features in the OG game are so limited, and the Switch 2 is trying to sell us on increased sharing and social features. So why shouldn't they make a sequel that integrates those features more intuitively? So in summary, yes, I do believe we will get a Game Builder Garage sequel on Switch 2. Unless Nintendo makes, like, a new Mario Paint game, or other totally new IP that isn't Game Builder Garage by name, but does practically everything you'd expect a Game Builder Garage sequel would do. But I don't know, let's just stick with yes for today, okay? And there you have it. Out of the 13 new IP Nintendo introduced on Switch, I predict 4, namely ARMS, Astral Chain, Ring Fit Adventure, and Game Builder Garage, will get Switch 2 sequels, leaving the other 9 to go/remain dormant until who knows when. But that's just the way it goes for most Nintendo IPs, isn't it? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you think I predicted too many of these games will make the jump, or too few? And which one do you think is getting a sequel first? Let me know in the comments, and if you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. I've got no shortage of video ideas on the topic of Nintendo IPs. Nintendo IPs, Nintendo IPs, a topic this suck gets incessantly. It's a little better. Still needs work though. I'm gonna prove you wrong, Mom!